Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Thursday, June 27, 2024. The first presidential debate between incumbent Democrat Joe Biden and Republican challenger, former President Donald Trump, is tonight. C-SPAN's live coverage begins 8 p.m. Eastern. The CNN presidential debate is scheduled for 9 p.m., and after, we will get your reaction. Just ahead on Washington Today, debate preview from the White House press secretary, Republican House members supporting Donald Trump, and Biden and Trump campaign spokespeople, plus new ads from both sides. The Supreme Court dismisses an abortion case from Idaho, which allows for now women in that state to receive abortions at hospitals if their health is at risk. The official release of the court's decision comes a day after it was mistakenly posted on the court's website. Attorney General Merrick Garland announces almost 200 people arrested in a nationwide healthcare fraud sweep. The fake healthcare claims totaling over $2.7 billion. Policies to promote electric vehicles, a point of contention at a House hearing today with the Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. Secretary of State Antony Blinken meets with the United Nations Coordinator for Aid to Gaza at the State Department in Washington, discussing the latest in the war between Israel and Hamas. And leaders of the two main political parties in Great Britain, the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and Labour's Keir Starmer, debate for the final time before the British general election, which is July 4th. We'll hear some of their exchange about immigration. Story from CNN. The confrontation in Atlanta between Joe Biden and Donald Trump Thursday night has a good chance of becoming the most faithful presidential debate in U.S. history. For the first time, a sitting president and an ex-president will lock horns before millions of viewers in an encounter taking place far earlier than normal, even before the party conventions. The CNN-hosted showdown is the most pivotal moment yet in a neck-and-neck election, and it's Biden's best chance to shake up a re-election bid that he is in deep danger of losing as he struggles to convince voters that he's delivered the political and economic normality he promised in 2020. That was the story from CNN. The White House press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, spoke with reporters on Air Force One as they and the president flew down to Atlanta.
Whenever there's an opportunity for the president to speak directly to American public, in this instance, it'll be millions of Americans watching, he takes that opportunity very seriously. And he understands that Americans are going to be watching, wanting to hear from their president, wanting to hear what he's been able to accomplish this last three and a half years. This is something that he does regularly, obviously, and to lay that out, to lay out the contrast on what we've been trying to do and what Republicans have been trying to do, extreme Republicans at that. I just talked about the Dobbs decision. I just talked about EMTALA. All of these things that we're seeing as it relates to reproductive freedom and contraception, being on the line, and IVF, and what we're seeing with 27 million women in 21 states that have abortion restrictions, what they've had to be going through. It is happening because of what the last administration did, because of the overturning of Roe v. Wade. So these are the things that you're going to continue to hear the president talk about, the contrast, whether it's the economy, whether it's expanding healthcare, making sure we're giving Americans a little bit of breathing room and not giving tax cuts to billionaires and corporations. That's not where we are. We want to protect Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. Republicans want to continue to try to gut that. So you'll continue to hear the president lay out what he's done in 3.5 years, and obviously, as we do regularly, give that stark contrast and lay out what's at stake.
Are you happy with the debate rules, the fact that there's no audience, the mic will be turned off? That's
something for the campaign to speak to. As you know, that was a discussion that they had, and so I'm going to leave that to them.
And what's the president's feeling about standing toe-to-toe with his main adversary tonight?
Look, I'm not going to speak directly to tonight and directly to his main adversary this evening, but look, you know this president. He likes to fight. He likes to fight for the American people. He believes on standing up for the American people. And you see him do that over and over again. And so, look, I would refer you to the State of the Union, and not just this year, but also last year, and how he was able to take extreme Republicans in the room on. I'm just going to leave that there.
The White House press secretary Karine Jean-Pierre holding a news conference on Air Force One during the flight to Atlanta for tonight's presidential debate. C-SPAN spoke this morning about the debate with Congresswoman Erin Houchin, Republican from Indiana.
I do intend to watch the debate tonight. I think it will be interesting. This debate has been so, I would say, locked down. The two, President Biden and Donald Trump, will be seated and not standing. There's no audience, so I think it will be a very different debate than we've ever seen for a presidential election. I hope that we'll see Donald Trump certainly talk about the successes that he had during his presidency and contrast that to where we are today. I don't think any American could say they're better off now than they were 4 years ago. Inflation when Donald Trump took office was 1.4%. Food is up 21%. Shelter is up 20%. Energy is up 36% under Joe Biden. Americans are feeling it. I hope to see Donald Trump just really stick to tonight his successes and contrast that with the failures of Joe Biden.
I know you've talked a lot about border issues. How much do you expect the CNN moderators tonight to bring up the border issues that you've been talking about?
I certainly hope that the moderators will bring up the border tonight, although that is a glaring problem for Joe Biden, so I'm not sure that they'll place enough emphasis on that. This is one of the number one issues that I hear about in my district in Indiana. The open border is an election issue. Inflation is an election issue. These are all issues that will turn the election, and it is turning the election in Donald Trump's favor. We'll see if they focus on that tonight. I hope they do, because it is very important to the American people. We have to close the border. We have to stop letting millions of people in. We've seen terrorists apprehended already in this country. It's an accident and a terrible tragedy waiting to happen. Under Donald Trump, the border was secure. We need to get back to that.
Congresswoman Erin Houchin, Republican from Indiana, on C-SPAN's Washington Journal program this morning. Story from the New York Times reads, expectations are higher for former President Donald J. Trump than for President Biden in Thursday night's presidential debate, according to a new poll by the New York Times and Siena College. The national survey conducted in the days before the debate found that 60% of registered voters thought Mr. Trump would perform very or somewhat well in the matchup. Only 46% said the same about Mr. Biden. Overall, nearly half of voters anticipated a poor showing for Mr. Biden, signaling that the president enters the televised event facing widespread skepticism and scrutiny over his ability to demonstrate his fitness for office. That was the article from the New York Times. Another New York Times article has the headline, Bringing Up Drugs, Undermining the Debates. These are old Trump tactics. And the subhead, ahead of a high-stakes debate, former President Donald J. Trump is trying to reset the low expectations he set for President Biden. Congressman Andy Ogles, on the House floor today, spoke about these points.
Tonight, the American people will tune in to watch a rigged debate with leftist hosts pretending to moderate. Biden's sham of a judicial witch hunt is as obvious to the American people as the amount of stimulants that Biden takes before his public appearances. Incoherent mutterings, lack of physical awareness, and wandering off demonstrate his cognitive decline. Ahead of tonight's debate, have no doubt his puppet masters will once again be administering a concoction of drugs to keep him awake. President Trump volunteered to take a drug test. The White House handlers, however, won't let Biden take a cognitive test because they know he'll fail. I agree with President Trump. The American people deserve transparency, which is why I introduced the No Juicing Joe Act, which would require the White House to notify Congress and the American people when Biden takes anything for cognitive decline. America is the leader of the free world. We need a commander-in-chief who is capable of articulating a coherent sentence, aware of his surroundings, and can lead with strength. A president like Donald Trump. I yield back.
Congressman Andy Ogles, Republican from Tennessee, speaking today on the House floor. Returning to the White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre's news conference aboard Air Force One, she was asked about this particular point.
What is the response to former President Trump's claims that President Biden may be taking something tonight to boost his performance?
I don't think that I should dignify that with an answer.
Karine Jean-Pierre, the White House press secretary. From Fox News, while President Biden and former President Trump meet on stage at the CNN presidential debate, their first face-to-face showdown in their 2024 election rematch, their campaigns will be engaged in combat online and on TV in the ad wars all day Thursday. The Biden campaign announced Thursday morning what they said would be a 7-figure media blitz launched ahead of the CNN presidential debate. They said it includes ads on the websites of BuzzFeed, USA Today, CNN, El Tiempo Latino, Telemundo, The Grio, and the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, where they'll spotlight what they argue are, quote, the dangers of electing Trump to a second term. Campaign also took out full-page ads in the hard copy editions of USA Today. The Trump campaign announced on Thursday morning they would launch 2 ads for Debate Day, their first 2 spots since the end of the GOP primaries over 3 months ago. That was from Fox News. Here is a Joe Biden ad released in the past few days, followed by an ad from Donald Trump that they say will be run during tonight's debate.
Donald Trump loves to attack Joe Biden.
Joe Biden. Joe Biden.
Because he's focused on revenge, and he has no plan to help the middle class. He'd just give more tax cuts to the wealthy. Joe Biden is working every day to make your life more affordable. He capped the cost of insulin, lowered healthcare costs, and made big corporations pay their fair share. Here's the difference. Donald Trump is only out for himself. Joe Biden is fighting for your family.
I'm Joe Biden, and I approve this message.
No matter what Joe Biden promised in the debate, ask yourself, are you financially better off since he became president? Are you and your family safer since he became president? Is our country more secure since he became president? After 4 years of failure under Joe Biden, it's time to make America prosperous and strong again. Donald Trump for president again.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message.
Ads released by the Donald Trump and Joe Biden campaigns. Donald Trump wrote on his Truth Social platform today, why does Fox News put on so many Biden people like Michael Tyler, communications director for Biden, who spewed lies with very little pushback? Amazing. And that post was all caps. Here's part of that interview.
I want to get your reaction to Van Jones from last Thursday. This is his take about how Biden has to do tonight. Watch here.
Because if Biden goes out there and messes up, it's game over. If he walks out there and a week later he's lower in the polls, it's panic in the party. But if he goes in there and he can handle himself against Donald Trump, a runaway train, a locomotive, a raging bull, then this guy deserves another shot to be president, because that is tough.
Do you agree with him? It's game over if it doesn't go well for Biden tonight?
Well, listen, the president is ready. He's excited to debate tonight. I think if you want to talk about Donald Trump, he's obviously not going to present the Donald Trump who's been out at his MAGA rallies on the stump. But the problem for Trump is that he's going to have to answer for all the things he has been saying at those MAGA rallies. He's going to have to answer for the role that he played in overturning Roe v. Wade. He's out there on the stump saying the extreme state-level abortion bans that he's responsible for are working out brilliantly. He's going to have to answer for the threat that he continues to pose to American democracy. You have Republicans now like Adam Kinzinger and Jeff Duncan, the former lieutenant governor of this state in Georgia, who are endorsing Joe Biden because they understand that if the sacred cause of America is going to continue to be democracy, that there's a home for you in Joe Biden's campaign, and he's the one to continue to carry this nation forward. And so Donald Trump, his demeanor may not be the same demeanor that we see on the debate stage or that we see at the MAGA rallies, but the problem for him is he's going to have to answer for all the things that he does say at those rallies on the debate stage tonight. That's what the president is focused on going into the night, and it's what the American people will see in the debate stage.
Michael Tyler, Biden-Harris presidential campaign communications director on Fox News today. Donald Trump presidential campaign national press secretary Karoline Leavitt did an interview with 11 Alive, WXIA TV in Atlanta.
We know that President Trump, he has not spoken highly of CNN because he feels like CNN has not spoken highly of him. He has agreed to come on this debate. My question for you, and today we actually heard from the president during one of his surrogate events. He was asked, does he feel like he's going to get a fair shot at this debate? He says, I don't know, hopefully. In your opinion, what does fair treatment look like on that debate stage Thursday night?
Well, we do hope that CNN will treat both candidates, President Trump and President Biden, fairly. We hope that they will ask good, tough questions of both candidates that are focused on the issues that matter to Americans. And poll after poll tells us that on the top of mind for voters across this country who will be tuning in tomorrow night, the issues are immigration, our wide open border, and inflation that is robbing hardworking families of thousands of dollars every single year. So we hope that CNN will ask those tough questions. We also hope that CNN will ask Joe Biden why he lied on the CNN debate stage 4 years ago about the existence of his son's laptop. Of course, that has become the infamous Hunter Biden laptop story, which at the time during that debate, Joe Biden brushed off as Russian disinformation. We now know that not to be true. And so we hope, again, that CNN will ask these hard questions of both candidates and stay focused on the issues that matter. And if President Trump is given adequate time to speak, if his microphone is not cut off by these liberal moderators, then we know this is going to be a great opportunity for President Trump to highlight his strength versus Joe Biden's weakness.
And we do know that President Trump has agreed to the rules that the mics will be muted until his time is to speak. So we will certainly see what happens.
Caroline Leavitt, National Press Secretary for the Donald Trump presidential campaign, being interviewed by 11 Alive TV in Atlanta. And MSNBC writes, more than 1,300 days since they were last in the same room, Joe Biden and Donald Trump will converge tonight for the first presidential debate of the 2024 race. If tonight's debate in Atlanta seems a little different, that's because it will be. The studio won't have a live audience, for instance, and there will be no opening statements. Another rarity, there will be 2 commercial breaks, during which Trump and Biden won't be allowed to consult with advisors. C-SPAN's coverage begins 8 p.m. Eastern. And then at 9 p.m. Eastern, a simulcast of the CNN presidential debate, scheduled to run 90 minutes. So at about 10:30 p.m. Eastern, we will get your reaction by phone and social media. This is Washington Today. Story from the Washington Post: hospitals in Idaho that receive federal funds must allow emergency abortion care to stabilize patients, even though the state strictly bans the procedure. The Supreme Court ruled on Thursday, one day after the opinion was prematurely posted on its website. The court's unsigned 6-3 decision does not address the substance of the case. Instead, while litigation in the matter continues, the justices temporarily reinstated a lower court ruling that had allowed hospitals to perform emergency abortions without being subject to prosecution under Idaho's abortion ban. 3 conservatives, Justices Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, and Neil Gorsuch, dissented. At issue is the nearly 4-decade-old Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act, known as EMTALA, which requires certain hospitals to stabilize or transfer patients needing emergency care. That was from the Washington Post. This decision was released as House Democrats were holding a news conference on the steps of the U.S. Capitol building about abortion and reproductive rights, and Congresswoman Diana DeGette of Colorado spoke about this case.
So I just want to jump in and say we just this minute learned the Supreme Court has in fact confirmed its leaked decision on the emergency abortion laws in Idaho just this moment. And so what they have done is they've dismissed the emergency appeal. What this means, practically speaking, is that women in Idaho, even despite Idaho's very restrictive abortion laws, will be able to still get emergency abortions while the court case makes its way through court. But let's not be under any illusions. Idaho only allows people in emergency situations, in emergency rooms, to get abortions. And so all the rest of the people in Idaho who need abortions as part of their regular health care still are banned from getting abortions. This is good news, but believe you me, it does not change any of what we've said today. Thanks, and thank you, Pete, for letting me jump in, and now I yield to our wonderful caucus chair.
Congresswoman Diana DeGette, Democrat from Colorado, at an event with other House Democrats outside the U.S. Capitol building. The state policy director for the Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America group posted a video about today's Supreme Court decision.
Good morning, this is Katie Lynn Daniel with Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America, bringing you an update on Idaho versus the United States. You might remember this is the case where the Biden administration sued, forcing Idaho to allow for abortions to occur in the emergency room, even when they are not during a medical emergency under the state law. Idaho law is clear. The state Supreme Court has even said so. This law protects both mothers and their unborn children. Today, the court kicks this case back down to the circuit court and to the appellate court for them to hear additional oral arguments on the issues outstanding in the case. We are disappointed because this means that this question will continue when it should be so clear that Joe Biden cannot unilaterally rewrite a federal law that for 4 decades has clearly protected a mother and her unborn child when she's suffering a medical emergency or when that baby is suffering a medical emergency. We know the truth that these two are inextricably linked. Congress was clear about that, and we look forward to Idaho continuing to defend their law and ultimately being victorious in support of both their pro-life law and all the moms and babies in our country. We are thankful for your support. We will continue to keep you updated as this case continues in the appellate court.
Katie Glenn Daniel is State Policy Director with the Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America Group, posting that video on X. Some of the other Supreme Court decisions today, as reported by the Washington Post, the Supreme Court dealt a blow to the Environmental Protection Agency's regulation of air quality on Thursday, putting on hold a major initiative to improve public health by reducing smog-forming pollution from power plants and factories that blows across state lines. That decision was 5-4. The case is Ohio v. EPA. And a divided Supreme Court on Thursday blocked a controversial proposed Purdue Pharma bankruptcy plan that would have provided billions of dollars to help address the nation's opioid crisis in exchange for protecting the family that owns the company from future lawsuits. There was also a 5-4 decision, that case Harrington v. Purdue Pharma. The Supreme Court has scheduled Friday as another decision day, where they'll release opinions potentially, and also decision day on Monday, July 1st. So the court will be going beyond the unofficial deadline each year of the end of June for finishing its work. And still among the high-profile cases, one dealing with presidential immunity, specifically Donald Trump, and another one on a law used to charge Donald Trump and other defendants in the January 6, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol. Story from Nexstar. After President Joe Biden pardoned LGBTQIA+ military service members from previous convictions based on their identities, the Biden family held a Pride Month celebration at the White House Wednesday.
Pride is a celebration, but it's also a declaration that we will not be silenced, that we will show up for ourselves and for our country and for each other. Our victories testify to that strength. 9 years ago, the Supreme Court legalized same-sex marriage across the country. And now, thanks to Joe, my husband, marriage equality will remain the law of the land. His administration also ended the ban on gay and bisexual men donating blood. He's standing firmly against conversion therapy. And almost 14 years ago, it's hard to believe it's been that long, Joe stood beside President Obama as he signed the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Then, as president, he made it possible for trans Americans to serve openly in America. Just this morning, Joe took another step to right those decades of injustice. Maybe you heard about it. Pardoning. It was so great, pardoning many service members who were court-martialed for simply being themselves, honoring those heroes. Honoring those heroes. I'm sure there's many of you in the crowd, and the service of many LGBTQ troops, veterans, and their families who have given so much for our country. Joe will never stop fighting for this community.
First Lady Jill Biden at a Pride Month celebration on the White House lawn Wednesday night. June is Pride Month. An article from thehill.com, House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican from Louisiana, led a panel discussion Wednesday afternoon regarding Title IX, which prohibits discrimination based on sex by educational institutions that receive federal funding. Title IX has been credited with opening opportunities for women to participate in athletic programs that were once heavily biased in favor of men. Some conservatives argue that allowing transgender women to compete in women's sports in effect reintroduces discrimination against cisgender women in competition. That was from The Hill. Here's Speaker Mike Johnson.
So we're celebrating the 52nd anniversary of Title IX. It's easy for me to remember because I was born in 1972 as well. It's been very, very important my whole life and most of all of your lives as well. But here's the problem. When President Biden took office, as you know, he began to issue a flurry of executive orders and make all sorts of pronouncements. And he told us from his first day in office that they were going to rewrite Title IX. They were going to dramatically revise it. And that was an ominous warning, and they made good on it. As you know, the Department of Education, the Federal Department of Education has gone about its effort to rewrite Title IX, and it's having a very devastating effect. It's something that is of great alarm to all of us because it's a harm and could be a great harm to women and girls, and especially in athletics and all these other arenas. And so we're going to talk about that today, talk about the harm and what can be done about it. Now, states are already stepping up because they're so concerned about this as well, and some have begun to file suit. And I'm proud to tell you, as a Louisianian, the first injunction has been issued now down in the Western District of Louisiana. The chief judge down there, Terry Doty, has done a great job in handling this. And I wanted to read you a little excerpt of that opinion because I think it's an important one. This is the first injunction against the regulation, prevents it from going into effect. And this is how the judge concluded the decision. Quote, "This case demonstrates the abuse of power by executive federal agencies in the rulemaking process," right? "The separation of powers and system of checks and balances exist in this country for a reason. Moreover, the abuse of power by administrative agencies is a threat to democracy," unquote. We could not say that any better ourselves. We agree with that wholeheartedly. And that is the problem, is that we have agencies in the federal government that have truly been weaponized against the people, the very people that these agencies are designed to serve and protect. Right now, they're doing the opposite. This judge is exactly right. We expect more of this in the courts, and we'll have to be doing a lot of advocacy in the days and weeks and months and years ahead. We've got to stand for the right thing.
House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican from Louisiana, on Wednesday on Capitol Hill, moderating a panel about Title IX and transgender athletes. The panelists included former Education Secretary Betsy DeVos and Riley Gaines, a former college swimmer and now an advocate on these issues. Washington Today continues in a moment.
Tonight, tune in to the CNN presidential debate, simulcast live on C-SPAN 2. Watch as the two presumptive nominees, President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump, face off as they try to earn your vote ahead of the general election in November. Our coverage begins at 8 p.m. Eastern with a preview of what's to come. And then at 9 p.m. Eastern, our simulcast of the CNN presidential debate. And following the debate, stay with C-SPAN as we take your calls and get your reaction to the first debate of the campaign season. The CNN presidential debate simulcast. Live tonight at 9 Eastern on C-SPAN 2, C-SPAN Now, our free mobile video app, or online at cspan.org. C-SPAN, your unfiltered view of politics.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the C-SPAN Now mobile app, which is free, and wherever you find your podcasts. From AP, nearly 200 people have been charged in a sweeping nationwide crackdown on healthcare fraud schemes, with false claims topping $2.7 billion, the Justice Department said on Thursday. Attorney General Merrick Garland announced the charges against doctors, nurse practitioners, and others across the U.S. accused of a variety of scams, including a $900 million scheme in Arizona targeting dying patients. That was the article from Associated Press. The Attorney General led a news conference today at the Justice Department in Washington.
We are here today to announce the results of a 2-week nationwide law enforcement action across 32 federal districts and against 193 defendants for their roles in healthcare fraud schemes. In addition to the charges and arrests being announced today, we are also announcing that we have seized over $230 million in cash, luxury vehicles, gold, and other assets in connection with these cases. The Justice Department has been clear that we will bring to justice criminals who defraud Americans and steal from taxpayer-funded programs. We have a particularly aggressive approach to combating healthcare fraud schemes that put people in danger for the sake of profits. Our efforts to combat healthcare fraud are focused on 4 fundamental principles. First, protecting vulnerable patients. Second, defending taxpayer-funded programs. Third, ensuring full accountability by prosecuting the perpetrators of these crimes and seizing their criminal proceeds. And fourth, using data analytics to keep pace with constantly evolving fraud schemes.
Attorney General Merrick Garland at a Justice Department news conference in Washington. Some more details from the AP story. In an Arizona case, one woman is accused of billing the state's Medicaid agency for substance abuse treatment services that didn't serve any real purpose or were never provided, prosecutors say. Another case alleges a scheme in Florida to distribute misbranded HIV drugs. Prosecutors say drugs were bought on the black market and resold to unsuspecting pharmacies, which then provided the medications to patients. A Mediaite article begins that Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg and Congressman Scott Perry, Republican from Pennsylvania, clashed at a Thursday House hearing where Buttigieg offered a live fact check of Perry's criticisms of the federal government pushing for electric vehicles. President Joe Biden has a goal of half the new vehicles being sold are electric or hybrid by 2030. The administration announced new climate regulations on pollution allowed from tailpipes in March to help accelerate this goal. That was part of the reporting from Mediaite. The hearing was held by the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee.
Now, recognizing that attempts to bribe the industry and the public into EV adoption have literally failed at this point, continue mandating CAFE standards, EPA tailpipe standards that are de facto EV mandates. And ideological allies in 12 states are seeking to ban the sale of non-EV cars. Now, we can talk about the proper role of government. That'd be a great conversation because I don't think that we have the authority or should have the authority to limit what consumers can buy in this regard or what they can own. But clearly, Mr. Secretary, this isn't working. So I'm wondering, is there some point, and if you've identified some point where you will stop, where the administration will stop, where the federal government will stop this requirement and let the market decide as opposed to this central planning model and this dictatorial policy?
Well, thank you. Given time is limited, I will confine myself to addressing the factually incorrect portions of what you have said, beginning with the assertion that EV sales are going down. They are, in fact, going up.
Does that include the government sales or private sales?
Every single year,
private sales
more
or government
Americans
sales,
have purchased
Mr. Secretary?
EVs. The entire market.
The government's forced to buy them, so sales are going up, but the private sector.
There are private sales too, yeah.
I'd like those numbers.
Sure. 1.2 million EVs were sold in the U.S. in 2020.
How many government and how many private?
We'll get you that breakout, but as you know, more private citizens buy EVs than government purchases.
No, I don't.
Let me address the second
true.
factual mistake in your remarks, which was that EV costs are getting higher. They're in fact getting lower, and according to J.D. Power, have now reached parity or are slightly lower than the equivalent gas-powered
Mr.
car.
Secretary? With or without subsidy?
Yeah, that does include the subsidy. That's right. But the point is they are going lower.
But they're not, because we're all buying them.
Your statement that they are going up is incorrect. The third incorrect assertion you made is that sales dropped in Q1. They did not drop compared to Q1 of the previous year. Of course, if you compare them to Q4, they drop because they always do, because car sales are seasonal. But I would imagine most people are aware of that. And
no,
fourth,
I'm talking about
I want to address
EV, Q4 to Q1. EV, not just overall car sales.
Any car sales go down Q1 to Q4 because more people buy cars in Q4. But what I'm telling you is every single year, more Americans buy EVs than the year before. And the word tailspin is just a bizarre word to use for a growing sector of our economy. We also think that since that's the way that the market is headed, we should not allow China to build on the advantage that they developed during the Trump administration, not because they're environmentalists, but because they understand the economic power of trying to dominate the EV market. We want those EVs to be made in America, and increasingly they are.
I'm happy to have them made in America, Mr. Secretary. What I'm not happy about is the mandate. The American people should be able to buy
That brings me to the
any
fourth and final
that
thing that
I
need to challenge as being factually inaccurate, which there is no mandate. You can purchase a gas car if you want to pay gas prices at the pump, but if you don't, you can purchase an EV with our help.
Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, questioned by Congressman Scott Perry, Republican from Pennsylvania, at today's Transportation and Infrastructure Committee hearing. On Wall Street, the Dow up 36, Nasdaq up 53, S&P up 4. On the Israel-Hamas war from DPA News, 7 people have been killed in Israeli army attacks on targets in Gaza City, the Hamas-controlled civil defense forces said on Thursday. Dozens more Palestinians have been injured in bombardment. The information could not be independently verified. The Israeli army said it was unable to confirm the information when asked for comment. Secretary of State Antony Blinken met at the State Department in Washington, D.C. with Sigrid Kaag, United Nations Senior Humanitarian and Reconstruction Coordinator for Gaza.
It's a great pleasure to have my friend and colleague Sigrid Kaag here as the UN Coordinator for Humanitarian Reconstruction Assistance for Gaza. Over the past week or so, we've been working to address urgent challenges that are making it difficult to deliver the necessary humanitarian assistance to the people of Gaza who so desperately need it, particularly when it comes to the security of the deliveries and those delivering the assistance. I raised these concerns clearly and directly with Israel's Defense Minister, Yoav Gallant, when he was here just a few days ago. And I think we've seen over the last couple of days some progress in Israel committing to address some of the needs that the United Nations in particular has to make sure that it can effectively and more safely deliver assistance. We continue to face the challenge of aid getting to and into Gaza, but then not being able to be distributed effectively because principally of real security challenges. And so when it comes to making sure that food, water, medicine, and other basic necessities that the Palestinian people need just to survive get to them, we continue to have important work to do. It's good that and important that Israel is addressing these very concrete needs, but they have to be implemented as quickly as possible. There is no time to lose. And I'm also eager to hear from Sigrid ongoing needs, ongoing requirements to make sure that both the United Nations, private providers of assistance, all of the countries that are working together to try to help Palestinian people who need it so desperately, how we can be more effective. With that, Sigrid, good to have you here.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, and indeed my friend Tony, but also, of course, the Secretary of State of the United States. I'm delighted to be here. It is indeed a very critical period. I'm responsible for the implementation of the Security Council Resolution 2720, which was born out of political necessity in the face of ever-growing humanitarian needs, reaching near catastrophic conditions when the resolution was adopted in December. It's been a very tough and difficult period for the civilians in Gaza, and of course also the families of the Israeli hostages who continue to live with deep uncertainty about the fate of their loved ones. But the focus of my mission is on the civilians in Gaza, to get the volume, the quality, and the predictability of assistance that they so desperately need, given the fact that they've left their homes. 1.9 million people are displaced. They survive in tents. There's absence of almost anything anyone could possibly imagine. So it's our task, indeed, not only to get the aid to Gaza, but also to have the ability to distribute this safely and securely. And I'm not only saying this for the United Nations family, it's also for the NGOs that risk their lives every day in their presence, Palestinian NGOs as much as the international NGOs. It's a very difficult operating environment for the civilians, first and foremost, but also those who seek to assist. And that is a constant dialogue where the support and leadership of the United States is so very important for the United Nations to be able to succeed, and equally so, if there is hope of a ceasefire deal, it's also important we take stock and we look towards the early recovery needs, health facilities, children back into learning, anything that forms part of what we would all consider human dignity for our fellow human beings. And that's a shared commitment, and the ongoing discussions with the Israeli government are extremely important in this regard, with strong support and the leadership of the United States, and Tony Blinken in particular.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken, joined by the United Nations Senior Humanitarian and Reconstruction Coordinator for Gaza, Sigrid Kaag, at the State Department today. On the House floor, Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, Democrat from Michigan, who has been calling for a ceasefire in the war between Israel and Hamas for some time, talked about civilian casualties.
The audio on January 29th of 6-year-old Palestinian girl Hind called as she was calling the paramedics, begging them to come rescue her after the rest of her family in the car had already been killed by the Israeli military. She kept begging, "Come get me. Please come get me. I'm so scared, please come." No one was able to reach the car for 12 days when her decomposing body was found alongside the bodies of 5 of her family members. The bodies of 2 Palestinian Red Crescent Society workers, missing since the day of her call when they were dispatched to rescue her, were discovered in the ambulance just feet away. And Madam Speaker, I'm here to talk about it because a new forensic analysis found that the Israeli military fired not 1, not 2, not a dozen, not 20, 355 tank bullets at the car that Hind was in. And the tank was so close that the Israeli soldiers would have had a clear view of Hind in the car. 6 months later, the State Department and President Biden has yet to hold the Israeli government accountable for these executions. So, Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to submit into the congressional record a forensic report.
Without objection.
Thank you, and I yield.
Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, Democrat from Michigan, today on the House floor. Story from the Times of Israel, backing the position expressed repeatedly by Israel's leadership. United States Senator John Federman, Democrat of Pennsylvania, said on Thursday that he would oppose any deal with Hamas that ended the Gaza war and left the terror group in power. He said, speaking in Jerusalem during his first trip to Israel, "I fully support the Prime Minister's idea that he can never allow a permanent ceasefire if Hamas is allowed to be functional. That's my red line on that." The freshman senator was clad in his trademark shorts and hoodie sweatshirt. And also another quote from him, "I could never support Israel being bullied into an artificial kind of permanent ceasefire against an enemy like Hamas." Senator Federman also met with the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and they posted a short video.
We've been through dire times in these months of anguish war. And during that time, I can say that Israel has had no better friend than Senator John Federman. Senator, welcome to Israel. I want to thank you for your courageous statements that show moral clarity and moral courage. And you just say it the way it is. And we appreciate this friendship at all times, but especially at these times. So welcome, friend. Welcome.
Well, we stand with Israel through this. And I'm so sorry for what's been done to this nation. But I'm just an honor to be here today.
Thank you.
All right.
And I look forward to visiting you in Washington. Thank you.
A video of the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu with Senator John Federman, Democrat from Pennsylvania, in Israel. Story from Stars and Stripes. The Inspector Generals of the Defense Department and the U.S. Agency for International Development announced Thursday that the agencies would open reviews into the U.S. military's floating pier used to transport humanitarian assistance to Palestinians living in the Gaza Strip. Each review will focus on a different aspect of the mission to move needed aid from the sea into the embattled enclave. While the first U.S. presidential debate is happening tonight in Atlanta, the final British general election debate was last night in Nottingham, England. British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, leader of the Conservative Party, facing Labour Party leader Keir Starmer. The election in the United Kingdom is July 4th. One of the issues in that debate, immigration. The Prime Minister begins.
This is about the future. I can tell everyone what I'm going to do with illegal migrants who come to our country. They will be on planes, be sent away because they shouldn't be here. What will you do with the illegal migrants that arrive to the UK? What will you do with them? You've had 3 weeks to think of an answer. What is it?
We've got tens of thousands of people here who've come unlawfully. The Prime Minister says he'll send them all to Rwanda. The Rwanda scheme takes a few hundred. It would take literally 300 years to get all the people who are here unlawfully to Rwanda. So they're going to stay here.
If elected, what would you do?
What would you do with them?
So at the moment, they're not being processed. So they're sitting in hotels, which you are all paying for. They're not processed, and as a result of not being processed, that means not a single one, even those that shouldn't be here, can be returned anywhere. So once they've got here under the Prime Minister's scheme, they're here for life. That's an absurd situation to have got into. So, yes, we do need to process. But
what will you do with them?
We've got to process the claim. You're sitting there with tens of thousands of people. But just
when
let me finish.
illegal migrants come to our country,
what
will you do with them?
Processed their claims.
It's a very simple question.
Well,
I can tell people what I will do with them. I will put them on planes to Rwanda because they shouldn't be able to stay.
Years.
What will you do with illegal migrants who come to our country? What will you do with them? It's a simple question.
His plan is
what will you do with them?
They need to be processed at the moment.
Processed?
They're not. These
which
claims
means giving
are not
them,
being processed.
to be clear, will mean most of them will be given asylum. They will get the right to remain in this country.
At the moment, 100% of them are effectively being granted asylum in this country because they can't go anywhere. They can't go anywhere. They cannot. The Prime Minister knows this, and if he thinks I'm wrong, he should say so. Because they're not being processed, they cannot be returned to where they came from. Can they, Prime Minister? If he wants to correct
Rishi Sunak?
now's his chance to do it.
I'm very clear about where we'll ask them. Well, do you know where these people come from?
No, he's not answering the question.
Do you know where they come
from?
Iran,
you can see.
Syria, Afghanistan. So when Keir Starmer says he's going to return people, is he going to sit down? Are you going to sit down with the Iranian ayatollahs? Are you going to try and do a deal with the Taliban? It's completely nonsensical what you are saying, right? You are taking people for fools, right? I think that these people should not stay in our country. They will be on planes to Rwanda. That's what I will do with them. You still can't answer the question. What will you do with them?
All the tens of thousands?
All the illegal migrants who arrive will be processed and put on planes to Rwanda.
50,000. Is that the scheme?
Is the choice for you.
50,
if you think illegal migrants should not be in our country, they should be sent somewhere else to build the deterrent, I will deliver for that for you. Do not surrender our borders to Keir Starmer and the Labour Party. This situation will just get worse. We will become the soft touch of Europe. And as I said the other night, they are queuing up in Calais waiting for a Keir Starmer to be in charge.
The British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, head of the Conservative Party, debating the Labour Party leader Keir Starmer Wednesday night in Nottingham, England. The debate hosted by BBC News. And it's their final debate before the general election in the United Kingdom, which is on July 4th. Some of the other topics that came up, the economy, healthcare, and government ethics. The polling average on the BBC News website for that election, Labour 40%, Conservative 20%. Another party splitting the other 20%. So if that holds, there will be a new British Prime Minister next week. And the U.S. presidential debate is tonight. Donald Trump, Republican, versus Joe Biden, Democrat. C-SPAN's coverage begins 8 p.m. Eastern. Then at 9 p.m. Eastern, a simulcast of the CNN presidential debate. And when it's over, approximately 10:30 p.m. Eastern, we'll get your reaction by phone and social media. And one more news item before we leave. This from The Hill. Members of the press knocked it out of the park Wednesday in the 16th iteration of the Congressional Women's Softball Game, bringing in a 9-4 victory over lawmakers. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Subscribe to C-SPAN's free evening newsletter word for word and get the stories making headlines in Washington sent to your inbox every day. Sign up at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night.